This talk is called Make It Relevant. My name is Jon Bell. I love giving this talk, so this is going to be a lot of fun for me. If you want to follow along on Twitter with a different hashtag, feel free to just use this. This seems as good a tag as any. So to kick things off, I want to talk a little bit about my father. This is not my father, of course. This is Lou Reed. But my dad likes Lou Reed quite a bit. But I never really liked him much as a kid. I actually liked this fellow, Marky Mark. When Marky Mark redid a Lou Reed song, I had a chat with my dad about which one was better, and we sort of agreed to disagree. Like, you know, he liked Lou Reed, I liked Marky Mark, no big deal. A few years later, Ira Glass, the host of This American Life, was being made fun of for having lowbrow tastes, and he said this: "Life is way too short, and anything that gives pleasure is good." Now, we've heard quotes like this a million times. This is not like it's not breaking new ground, but I was in art school at the time. So that quote really kind of blew my mind. Why? Because I was being taught that there is great art and there is great design, and if you can do art and design at that level, then everything is super. But it was weird because I liked stuff like this too. And a lot of people would consider something like this, you know, lesser and not as good. And it made me think back to that Marky Mark Lou Reed conversation where Marky Mark got money from me, Lou Reed got money from my dad. You don't have to talk about good or bad. It's just they're both successful because they're targeting different people. This is kind of a crazy idea, and it brings it down to something that actually my friend said just a couple days ago. If you take art off its perch and you just say it's a thing done well, as my buddy said, this is my buddy, by the way, my favorite picture of all time at a wedding. This is him showing up late to my wedding, and she was not pleased. So if you agree that art is just a thing done well, and if you agree that quality is relative, I kind of freaked out. I was in art school being taught how to go up here. Hold on, if quality is relative, that changes everything. It means it's not always just about great design. Sometimes it's about being relevant. And as I've gotten older, I've started realizing, actually, no, it's always about being relevant. Now, that might explain a little bit why back in the day I thought Marky Mark was awesome, and why back in the day, because remember, I was young, I thought Lou Reed, frankly, was just boring. Now, speaking of boring, Al Gore had a lot of trouble in 2000 because he was smart, he was principled, he had these policy ideas, he had books. He went up against someone that had none of these things, but Bush could connect with people, and Al Gore had trouble with that. Again, 2004. Democrats put up basically Al Gore with Vietnam experience. Yeah. But he did not connect with his audience. George Bush did. Despite the fact that people weren't thrilled about how he was doing, he was reelected looking like this, looking like sort of the everyman. What I learned from that, and it was painful, is that it wasn't about the better candidate, it was about the one that can resonate with people. That makes a huge difference. You see this also in Steve Jobs' worst failure, coming back to Apple the second time. Now, I'm probably the biggest Apple fanatic I know, so this is hard for me to say. I love this product, but it got canceled. Why did it get canceled? It went up against this. When people went to the store, they weren't interested in the thing that one day was going to be in a museum. They were interested in something that they could afford and could get on the internet and play games. It wasn't about the better designed product. It was about the one that was more relevant to people's lives. What about chairs? This is a really fantastic design. Everyone agrees this is a fantastic design in the art community, but most people kind of shrug and they buy this. It's soft, and no one really necessarily cares that much how it looks. They just want to be able to sit in it and watch reality TV. Now, reality TV, everyone's like, oh, I can't believe people watch that stuff. It's so stupid. Why don't they watch things like Arrested Development? But really, dig deep, think about it. This show, I love it, but it's challenging. This is not always the thing that people want to see after a really long day. It wasn't about the best script on TV. It was about what was relevant to people after a long day, just what they wanted to unwind to. See the same thing with art. This is great art, but a lot of people look at it and they're like, okay, it's blocks of color. They buy stuff like this. People see things in this. You know, you might like swans. You might like nice trees. You might like that totally non-ironic double rainbow. One way or another, it's not about the best art necessarily. It's about the thing that matches someone's couch or that they want to wake up to in the morning. That makes a big difference. So, hold on, my clicker's having trouble. Boop. There we go. So why am I saying all these things? When I went to art school, I was taught all about one side of the equation and not the other side. And I think the other side is actually more important. The first side is very exciting. That's this. Clicker. The exciting one was that design is communication. When I heard this, I freaked out. I was like, I want to communicate for a living? Yeah! That's why I was in art school. That's why I love what I do. This is very exciting. But I'm going to tell you something that's a little depressing, and it doesn't get enough credit. We need to teach it more often in schools, and we need to drive it home like every once in a while. And here it is. Communication is political. Designers want to change the world. Developers want to change the world. Everyone in this room, I assume, wants to change the world. But no one ever changed the world with headphones on in the back of some office, dropping PSDs on a folder at the end of the week. You have to be able to take that design, take that amazing vision that you have, and turn it into real change. You have to be able to pitch it to the right people. You have to get an audience in the mainstream. It's not good enough just to stand back and say, I'm a better design. You have to go further with it. Now, it's particularly hard because designers are a very tiny minority. And I went looking. I went and I found the 2008, some data from 2008. I got all the people that graduated in 2008. I figured out all the different degrees that people had, pulled out the ones that had to do with art, and here's what I found. 0.5%. I don't even believe this stat. I went through the numbers so many times. I was like, there's no way that number is this low. Apparently it is, based on what I found. Now, what does a designer do when he has a whole bunch of data in a spreadsheet and wants to make a point? He makes an infographic. And I worked on this one for a really long time. So this is what I like to call the pink dot. Now, I do not mean to put down the pink dot. The pink dot is awesome. I love the pink dot. A lot of designers have whole careers designing within the pink dot, designing for other designers and doing very well. There are great parties in the pink dot. There's great TV shows coming from the pink dot. The pink dot has huge influence, but it's still pretty tiny. A lot of stuff that we've seen recently from this pink dot is this sort of, hey, let's collaborate online kind of stuff. Let's inspire each other online, and that's awesome. That gets to the heart of what's great about design. So we've got Found to show off really cool stuff. We've got Dribbble to show off what's going on in your portfolio right now. We've got Pinterest, find stuff on the web. We got Milkshake, made by the guy that did FilePile. These are all really great sites. These are pink dot people designing for people within the pink dot, and it's awesome. However, this can prove that you don't have to sell out. There are millions and millions and millions of people out there that love this stuff, that make up that pink dot. So you don't have to sell out, but whether you are targeting the pink dot or trying to go to the mainstream, you have to learn how to sell your stuff. It is not good enough to sit by and just be awesome and not prove it. An example of this, weirdly enough, is Arcade Fire. What? So I love Arcade Fire. They're a very pink dot band, very indie. They're going along doing music. They come out with their third album. Everyone's just going along normally. And then they won Best Album of the Year. This really kind of surprised a lot of people. No one had any idea who they were. They jumped out of the pink dot, kind of accidentally. Using an example that wasn't an accident, though, one of my favorites, 30 Rock. 30 Rock is clever, it's awesome, it's gotten a bunch of awards, and here's the thing I like about it the most. It wasn't canceled. This is a challenging, I mean, it's not that challenging, but it is not a mainstream show. And they have found a way to not be canceled. This is very inspiring to me. Even Bill Clinton himself, he actually used to be very bad at speeches. No one knows this. He used to give these 3-hour speeches about policy, and no one cared. So you know what he learned how to do? Edit. He got fanatical about taking out all the big words, sections that weren't necessary, because he is a brilliant man, and he knew when he was president, it wasn't about the quality of the speech. It was about if he could land it and make it relevant to people. Now, design is not a zero-sum game. And now, I promise, I'm not going to talk about politics anymore. Politics is very depressing because it is a zero-sum game. For this guy to win, this guy has to lose. And it's usually dudes and increasingly Republican. This is all very depressing. But design is not depressing. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't have to go kill something to make something great. And that's really cool. We should keep that in mind. Think about Nintendo. They went up against Xbox and PlayStation. They were not doing well. What did they do? They became relevant to more people. And they succeeded tremendously. They are printing money. There's a lot to be learned from this kind of approach. Similarly, movies. Because after all, I have seen this movie, I have seen this movie. I knew what to expect in both cases. This is not a matter of like, oh, I see this movie and this one goes out of business at all. It's not a zero-sum game. Most people in this room, you are probably not fighting in a zero-sum game, so it's okay. But I want you to put on your hats for a second. Pretend you are the director of Helvetica. Congratulations, you are a hero to the pink dot. Not many people are going to see your movie or even know why someone would see a movie about a typeface. But the people that do see it, love it. Great. Let's say a law gets passed, though. We'll call it the zero-sum law. And that law says, okay, hey, everybody, anytime a person sees a movie, they have to sign a contract. And that contract says, I refuse to see any other movie for 2 whole years. That kind of sucks. Because all of a sudden, it's not good enough to sit over here with something really well designed. You're going up against this big crazy robot that you know everyone is buying. Which brings me to my day job. I'm on the Windows Phone design team. I'm actually very new. Been there about 9 months. And I got on the team because I saw this design. I freaked out. I loved it. As an Apple fanatic, I loved it. And I was like, I have to work on this. This is awesome. But I realized, oh no. Are we going to be the Arrested Development of cell phones? Canceled? Or are we going to be the Arcade Fire of cell phones and do what we're doing but be recognized for it? And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? No, screw that. I want to be the Lady Gaga of cell phones. True to an artistic vision, but still tremendously successful. So this is something that's been on my mind quite a bit, but I do have a confession. I just mentioned a second ago that I fell in love with the design. Well, I was actually at Frog Design. I saw this graphic on Engadget, working along at Frog, doing my thing. And I saw this, and to be honest, I wasn't impressed. If the baseline is an iPhone, and I thought about it really hard, that first impression was probably about down here. I had no reason to buy a Windows Phone. I was like, nah, iPhone's fine. But I'm a designer, so I thought I'd do some research. And what I found is like, whoa, hold on. This approach of getting rid of Chrome and trying to be more influenced by print design, it really opens up some interesting stuff. I was a developer for a while. I understand how they did this. This is a standard list on iPhone. But this, wow, that's actually design. Saw the same thing on Netflix. I remember thinking amazing things happen when you get rid of all the Chrome. I remember looking at Flickr. Sorry about this horrible graphic. But Flickr had a movie showing off their new Windows Phone app. It looked really great. And I was like, what does the iPhone app look like again? Well, it looked like that at the time. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really crazy for me. I love Apple, but I've got to say, I've grown into I've grown into it. It took me some time, but I got to the point where I would say, you know what, iPhone and Windows Phone, it's a toss-up. They're good at different things, definitely. But for me, I think I can like both of them. What was happening here is it was becoming a little bit more relevant. But then, somewhere around this time, I saw Flipboard. And I remember people saying, Flipboard, it's a custom magazine for your life. And I remember being like, blah, blah, blah. I've heard this a million times. I remember seeing this picture and being like, this isn't relevant to me. I don't care about Oprah or broccoli. Like, who cares? But I installed it. And within 1 minute, I had typed in my credentials like Google Reader and Twitter and Facebook and everything. And then, boop, my friends loaded up on it. And I saw my own son come across the screen. And I freaked out. And I was like, OK, you got me. It's one of my favorite iPad apps. It proved its relevance in like 1 minute. That's the gold standard. So I ended up hang on. That's not. So when that happened, I had a hunch. I was like, wait a second, maybe Windows Phone, which struck me as a little bit maybe elitist, a little bit cold, it wasn't really relevant to me, maybe it's kind of like Flipboard. And so I don't have a slide for this. I just have text. So I went to the store. I got a Windows Phone. I typed in my credentials. And the phone, just like Flipboard, started going like blam, blam, blam. There's a picture of my wife, pin her to the home screen. The phone, much like Flipboard, has this way of going from empty canvas to your life. And I was like, okay, that's really impressive. And it wasn't the font, the typeface that was used. It wasn't the colors. They could have used Comic Sans for all I care. The point is, it had my life in it, and that was really significant. Looks kind of like this. This is just a stock photo. But there's this kind of approach that I thought was really interesting. So I ended up way up here. I actually thought it was better than iPhone. This is hard for me to say. Again, I love Apple. But I was like, you know what? This is so much more relevant than just those grid of icons. This is really cool. I ended up all the way up there in something I'm going to label so awesome that people switch jobs just to work on your amazing product. And that's exactly what happened. I quit my job at Frog Design, jumped on the team. Now, for everybody in the room, you all have products. You're thinking about some company you want to start, or you're coming up with a new version of something, or you're a student trying to think about how to do great design. Just remember, you're losing people down here. You're not proving yourself to be relevant at all. What you want to be able to do, whoop, hang on, still having trouble with my clicker here. What you want to be able to do is get up there as quickly as you can. And I think we have a lot of focus on aesthetics, which is great, but just remember, how did I get up there on Windows Phone? Think about your own product as I say this. It wasn't the typeface, it's not the logo, it's not the grid, it's not the social strategy, it's not the buzz, it's not the SEO strategy, it's not your CEO, it's not your connections, not your credentials, it's not your investors, it's not your patents. It's proving that you are relevant to your target audience. That is the thing that matters. Now, thinking back to Flipboard, this is basically the path that Flipboard took. Windows Phone, frankly, took way too long to win me over. It was like 3 months of not caring until I finally bought one, which is a huge commitment. Flipboard was free. Whoop, went straight up. I have no reason to buy a Flipboard competitor or look at one because of this. Although a lot of sites, we all know these sites. They do this. You see them and you're like, that is a fantastic aesthetic design. Where does it fit into my life? There are so many things like this. They are doing all sorts of things right, but they're not actually breaking through and showing their relevance. And that is the big distinction that they're making. So when you're thinking about your products, when you're trying to do great design, all of these things that I just mentioned, the composition of the page, all these things are very, very important. But just remember, you don't have a great design until you can prove its relevance. Thank you.